I remember in 1987 when I graduated, the ceremony was held at Stonehenge. Roger Revelle was still alive at the time. He shook my hand, but he held on to it for a moment, and he looked me in the eyes and said, "I'm so proud of you." And it really shook me. He was a rebel amongst rebel scientists that founded this campus and was the director of Scripps Institute of Oceanography. He was a real entrepreneur scientist, and that was something that I wanted to do. One of the things that appealed to me about UCSD was the fact that it had a college system. So it wasn't just about a STEM education. As painful as it was to have to read 300 pages of literature for humanities every week, I now realize that that's what enables me to tell stories better about the science that I'm involved with.
Tim has founded a number of very successful startup companies. I'm especially a fan of his efforts with TEGA Pharmaceuticals, which was a UC San Diego startup that he nurtured here at UCSD.
We started a small biotech company called TEGA Therapeutics, and I went to Paul Robin on campus with the Tech Transfer Office and just asked him, "Hey, can we get some space on campus?" And they just happened to have some space in the pharmacy building that they gave us. We had scores of people just walking down the hallway, graduate students and professors that would come down and say, "Hey, I got this idea for a company. What do you think?" We ended up being involved with 5 or 6 companies that spun out of UC San Diego during that time, simply because we were on campus.
I am so thrilled that Tim was named the CEO and president of Biocom California. And now with Tim's larger role and Biocom's more expansive role, these efforts will be leveraged across the entire state of California, and in fact, globally.
You know what excites me about Biocom California and this new role that I'm in is that we have 1,800 members, incredibly smart people doing really good work to develop medicines and tools to help people with unmet medical needs. And to be part of an organization that is supporting that and growing it is really valuable, and it's just an honor to be involved with it.
Through Tim's efforts, more UC San Diego students from all across the campus have had opportunities to work, and he's really shaped their careers by providing them these opportunities while they're undergraduates at UC San Diego.
Starting something from scratch to solve a need that hasn't been met is really gratifying. But I think that the most important thing for me in all of that has been developing other people, developing young people through internship programs, developing leadership teams, building teams. The people are really what makes it so valuable.
Tim, congratulations. I am so pleased that you won the Illustrious Alumni Award. You're very deserving of this honor. Thank you for everything you do for UC San Diego and our students.